Thanks for joining the Prosper Sellers Podcast. My name is Steve Yates, your host and CEO of Prime Guidance. Joining with me today is Josh Hadley with Ecomm Breakthrough. Josh, welcome.
Hey, Steve. Good to be here.
Thanks for dedicating some time to be on the podcast. I've known you for a number of years now, and boy, every time that I've seen you at conferences and so forth, you're always winning awards or being voted best speaker or what have you. So I know you're going to have some awesome things to share with the audience. So I guess, why don't you introduce yourself to get started?
Yeah. So name is Josh Hadley. So first and foremost, I'm a father of four. Currently the ages of my kids are from 10, 6, 4, and 9 months old. So we are in the thick of things right now. And then have a beautiful wife. She's the secret sauce to our business. She's a graphic designer and creates all of our products. We have been on Amazon for nearly a decade. We're coming up on a decade here next year. And we've just seen explosive growth. We've been in the 8-figure range annual revenue for the past 3 years. And right now we're on a mission to get to 9 figures. So that's where we're looking to go there. And then on the side, I do my podcast called Ecomm Breakthrough. And that is where I share actionable strategies to help people scale from 7 to 8 figures and then beyond. And ultimately what I'm trying to do is share my own journey of things that I'm doing in my own business to scale to those 9 figures. And so hopefully my hope in every episode is that people walk away feeling like, oh, here are some practical, tangible things I can implement in my business if I want to grow it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the best way to learn, right? Seek out wisdom from people that have been there, done that. So you don't have to learn the same mistakes. You can learn from their mistakes and you can learn what's working for them and how do I emulate it. And I think that's spot on. So tell me, some of the more critical elements that when you look back and say, boy, man, we went from here to there. What were the pivotal elements that you put in place to help you, get on that growth trajectory?
Yeah, I think so. It's always having a bigger vision, right? And knowing what it is that you want to do. So we'll rewind the tapes all the way back to when my wife and I graduated college. So we both graduated from the University of Utah. I graduated with my MBA there. My wife graduated in early childhood education. And I got a job offer with American Airlines, which brought us from Utah down to the DFW area in Texas. And that's where I started my career in the American Airlines MBA leadership rotational program. But it was probably like 3 or 4 months into that job where I was like, I am not cut out for this corporate life. I just see so much wasted time, tons of bureaucracy. The leaders that are in leadership spots weren't actually like impressive individuals. They had just kind of found their way there through politics or whatever it was. And I was just like, this is not going to be where me, who's very like hungry and driven, like I'm not going to thrive in this environment. Now I'll give you the secret to the end of that story. Like I ended up staying there for 5 years. So like I did my time there for sure. But it was literally 3 or 4 months into working there that my wife on the side, after she graduated and we moved down here, she was like, do I need to go get a job or can I play around with this? Like I've always enjoyed graphic design. Like, could I just teach myself and play around with it for a little while? And I was like, yeah, that's totally fine. Like we don't have any kids, and we had a good salary. So yeah, do your thing for a little while and we'll see where life takes us. So she began doing graphic design work and she had friends that would reach out to her and say, hey, I'm getting married. And my wife would be like, oh, I would love to just like design your wedding invitations for free, just because she wanted something to work on. And so she did it for this one friend and she designed these beautiful wedding invitations. Her friend was like, these are incredible. This is like, I have to pay you for these. And then that friend then referred other friends. And so from that moment, like myself being the business and entrepreneur man that I am, I was like, that's a business. And so I then kind of set up a little sales funnel, so to speak, where I joined thousands of Facebook groups. This is like 2015, thousands of these Facebook groups that were like, Wedding Exchange, Oklahoma, Brides to Be, New York, etc. Right. So I joined all these groups under my wife's name. And then anybody that was like saying, hey, who has recommendations for wedding invitations or whatever, like I was always one of the first ones to go in there, comment, and just try to drum up business. And then that was actually my first foray into Facebook ads as well. We created a Facebook ad, and back in the day, that was like, it was like shooting fish in a barrel. Like the moment I turned on that ad, like it was profitable, and we had like a wait list at the end of it all. Like before we wrapped up that business, we had a 6-month waiting list just to work with my wife. So going back to your question, Steve, is, hey, so where did this explosive growth come from? So we did 6 figures our first year doing the wedding invitation business. That was cute. That was nice. It was a nice side hustle for us, right? And I learned some things. But I remember telling this to my sister at the time, and I was like, I want our business to become like, at the time, I was like, I think we could get to $1 million business. And I thought that was like incredible, right? But I had that. I think the first thing is that you have to have that as like a goal and a desire and something that you're shooting towards. So what I ultimately did realize is that, man, this wedding invitation business, in order to scale to $1 million, I'm going to need to hire more people like Becca, more designers, to be able to do this. So if Becca can produce $250,000 worth of revenue for the business, that means I need 4 graphic designers in order to get to $1 million. And I was like, that doesn't sound like a fun business to be in. It's just like hiring graphic designers. They all have their own styles. And then you're dealing with brides on top of that. Like, not as exciting. But there were a bunch of courses that were going on at the time of how to sell on Amazon, how to make a bunch of money. And I had actually dabbled in it quite a few different times, doing retail arbitrage, sold my college textbooks on Amazon. So I was like familiar with Amazon. But it dawned on me that I was like, what if we could take some of these designs, and instead of custom designing them, would people want regular fill in the blank invitations? Is that still a thing? It's still old school, but like, is that still a thing? And sure enough, our first product we released on Amazon was just like these recipe cards, because people want them for their bridal showers. And we sold out within our first like 2 months. And I was like, holy smokes. That was the fall of 2016. And then all of 2017, we took that leap of faith where we literally shut down the wedding invitation business. And then we went all in on Amazon, and we did $1 million our first year on Amazon. So I think the principle is this. So this is kind of like pivot number 1 in our journey, where it's like, when you have this bigger goal of reaching whatever revenue figure you want to reach to, you've got to do the math behind it to see, like, can my current business model sustain that? And if it can't, maybe there needs to be the opportunity to jump ship and take that leap of faith to an opportunity that you see can actually get to whatever your dream state is. So that was kind of story number 1. I'll pause there, Steve, because I've got a couple more stories I can share, but questions you have, thoughts on that?
I love that. And I love how you actually contemplated the business plan on how to get there in advance. And I think all too often Amazon sellers, they just kind of fly by the seat of their pants, and they have these goals that are lofty, but they're not really obtainable. And maybe they're attainable with the right processes, systems, tools, etc. And like, for example, there's going to be a certain percentage of your assortment that needs to fall by the wayside every year. And there's a certain percentage of newness that needs to happen in order to see good, consistent growth a lot of times. And that's not always contemplated. Not all the cost considerations are contemplated and so forth. So you understanding that we couldn't scale without having to rely on a bunch of other people, which kind of takes away your secret sauce. So you pivoted and said, how can we use our secret sauce, which is your wife, and do it in more mass scale in a platform that's growing exceptionally fast, and do, be a leader in that space. I think it's really smart. What did you, when you started expanding the business and so forth, what kind of efforts did you take to make sure you're hiring the right people and prioritizing the right efforts and things like that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question to ask. I think on that note there, Steve, this goes back to like planning. And this is not to get too biblical on you, but right before God created the world, things were created spiritually before they were created temporally, right? So if we
Sure.
understand that principle, that applies to business as well. And I feel like this is just a principle of life. So if you want your brand or you want a business that does $10 million in revenue, you need to be able to articulate and plan how you are actually going to achieve that. And you hit the nail on the head, Steve, where like most Amazon brand owners, they fly by the seat of their pants and they do this. They're like, I want to double revenue. Well, how am I going to do that? Well, I don't know. I'll just launch some products or something like that. But guess what? If you just backwards plan, right? You could say, all right, how many products do I need to launch in order, if my current business is at 5 million and I want to get to 10 million, how many products do you actually need to launch in order to get to that stage? Okay. And then what is your success rate on those products, right? So when you launch a new product, what's your hit rate? Is it 75%? Is it 50%? So you can then, like, the lagging indicator or the lagging metric is $10 million. Your leading measure and your leading actions that you should be working on every day is going to be like, how many new product ideas did I find? Because if I know I'm going to need 50 brand new products because my hit rate's at 75%, so I know some of those I'm going to drop down to like 35 that are going to be like live and living, right? If you just backwards plan all of that, it then brings everything to like, what's the one thing that I need to focus on today? Okay. And way too often when people reach out to me, whether it's for coaching, consulting, or whatever it is, right? They're like, man, I don't have any time. Like, I spend all my time looking at inventory. I spend all of my time dealing with seller support cases, optimizing my listings, et cetera. And it's like, those are all okay things. They're not bad things in the business, but you are not driving growth by focusing on any of those areas, right?
Yourself, right, is the key.
100%. Yep. Yeah, you have to be the growth driver. So when it comes back to it, Steve, you asked about like this hiring and how did our brand continue to grow to where it is today? It was the simple principle of like, I understood that I need X number of products that will bring X amount of revenue every single year. And so I need to get everything else off my plate that is not focused on new product launch, new product development. And so one of my first hires was a project manager, because when I conducted a 2-week time study, I went through and I realized the majority of my time is spent, all right, I need to go do the SEO for the listing now. All right, now I also need to go and I need to make sure I have images. Now I need to make sure that I've actually placed that PO, and I need to get the shipping labels, make sure that's coming into Amazon. All right, now I need to actually go make sure that all of that stuff is live on Amazon. I need to upload everything. Like, it's the whole spectrum from ideation all the way to like, okay, you're live on Amazon. That I was like, I'm just caught just trying to play middleman between my wife, manufacturers, and our assistant at the time that was doing a lot of the grunt work, so to speak. And I was like, what if I could just get 50% of things off my plate by hiring this project manager? And sure enough, they came in, they took a large portion of time off my plate. Then guess what I did to reinvest that time? I reinvested it back into the business by finding new products. And so all of a sudden, like what we were once doing was like launching 10 products a year, became 20 products a year, became 30 products a year, so on and so forth. And I think that is where most people get stuck, is that they just hire just because they heard somebody else has a supply chain manager. Doesn't necessarily mean that that's your biggest unlock in your business right now. You have to identify like, what can I get off my plate so that I can focus exclusively on growth.
And where can you add the most value, right? So like, I can't tell you how many times I have talked to business leaders that get way too stuck in the weeds doing things where they don't add any value. They're adding resources, but they're not adding value. So, for example, I'm going to go in the warehouse and pick and pack and help the team. You should be hiring someone to do that so you can focus on other things. If that is taking up your time, you've got to evaluate, is that the right level of value that I, as a leader in the business, can add to the organization? And if not, and secondly, can I off, get that off my plate? If I can, by hiring the right person to do the job instead, you should be, deploying that tactic and bringing it up a level and saying, I'm going to focus on the things where only I can really add this unique value, or only I can really lead the charge that's going to have a bigger impact across the organization. And I love that you did an actual time study for 2 weeks to determine what were those things, because when you're doing those things, you don't see it. You can't see the forest through the trees. It's like, that's just what my day looks like. That's what's on my calendar. And you really need to analyze it and say, wow, I spent this many hours this day or this week, and what were actually my contributions to that, the business, and could it have been done by someone else? Even though they might be very valuable contributions, they just may not be the types of things that you personally need to focus on.
Yep, 100%. Steve, I have right in front of me, in front of my desk, every day I look at it, there are only 3 things that I should focus on in the business. And these are the 3 things that actually drive growth in the business. If I don't do anything to affect one of those 3 levers on any given day in the business, I have failed as a leader. I have failed my business, because guess what? The revenue we are currently enjoying right now in the business is basically just all the work that we did 12 to 18 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So really, like, it's not going to kick you in the face. Like your procrastination or laziness today, or getting caught in the thick of thin things, is not going to catch up to you tomorrow, but it will catch up to you 6, 12 to 18 months from now. So those 3 things that I prioritize, and I make sure I am doing something to drive these things forward every day, is number 1, new product development. Number 2, distribution channels. And number 3 is brand awareness. Those are the 3 things, like those equate to sales. Those equate to revenue. So anything else that I am doing in the business, I am either focused on hiring somebody to become my new product development manager, or I am hiring somebody to run my new TikTok shop channel, or I am hiring somebody that's creating an affiliate program for me, right? But I am focused on those 3 things, because that's where sales beget sales. And if you're not focused on that as a leader, and you spend your time caught in, sales tax filing, seller support cases, anything else, that is just trying to steal your time. And as a CEO, your time is your most valuable asset. I know everybody preaches that to you, but if your inbox has 0 messages in it, I'm going to tell you, like, you're spending your time unwisely. Like, my email inbox is not great, but it's because, like, I'm prioritizing the things that are actually necessary and that will continue to drive the business forward.
Long time ago, I had a boss that told me, your job is to determine the 80% of things you're going to do today and the 20% that need to fall by the wayside, because those 20% will suck up all your time and let you focus on the wrong things. And it's just not humanly possible to do everything that you probably want to do that day. So you got to prioritize. It's a really valuable lesson that you shared. Have those couple items front and center. Remind yourself constantly, and then analyze and hire where you need to. I think that's unfortunately all too often not the case. And then people get stuck in the weeds, and then growth slows. And as you mentioned, these things do have this way of impacting you far out. And not only could those negative things be impacting you far out, but the positive things that you're trying to implement may take a long time to initiate, and you've got to be planning well ahead. So, for example, if you're going to say this year or next year or whatever, I'm going to expand into Europe. Well, it's not so easy. You've got to put VAT in place. You've got to get distribution in place. You've got to have a bunch of elements that you may have that on your roadmap, but there's a lot of things you need to do to put it in place by then. Same thing with, we talked about new product development. You may have a trademark in one category, but part of your growth strategy is I need to expand into new categories. I need that trademark to be expanded. That takes time to get the trademark approved in the new category. The sooner I can recognize that, the sooner I can put those levers in place. And that keeps the momentum going and keeps the ball rolling, if you will. So thinking really forward looking and analyzing backwards and seeing what could I have done different and how can I use my time better is, I think, very valuable.
Steve, I think this is also a super important principle. Like, you as the leader of your business, you have to be able to coach and teach your team this same principle. So number one, yes, it's important for you as the leader to be able to implement these practices for yourself, and that can drive massive growth for the business. But the second thing, and where the real magic happens, is when you can articulate to your team, hey guys, here are the big rocks here are the 3 priorities that you should always be focused on first and foremost in your day. Because, my favorite analogy, and this is like the Sunday school analogy, right? Where you would have you have a jar, right? And you're going to fill it with sand and rocks. And if you fill it with sand first, the rocks will not fit inside the jar. But if you dump the rocks in first, then the sand will move around the rocks and everything fits perfectly in that jar, right? Yep. And so that is the principle, that this is a timeless principle for business leadership and just business activities in and of itself, is that if you don't focus on the 3 most important things first in your day, you're just going to get piled on with the sand. And the sand is your email inbox, somebody that wants to connect and have a chit chat with you, right? They want to pick your brain. Like, that's just stealing away time from you to work on those 3 priorities in your business. Somebody says, hey, we have a customer support issue. We need to ship out a new product, but we're out of X, Y, and Z or whatever. It's like, okay, that's fine, but that stuff can wait. Yeah. Right. Yeah. If you focus first on those 3 priorities and you don't open your email inbox, you don't start working on anything else except moving something forward to those 3 priorities, then everything else becomes easier in the business. So my favorite book is called The One Thing by Gary Keller. And I mean, it's that principle on steroids. It's like, focus on the one thing that is going to knock the biggest domino that will knock over everything else and make everything else 10 times easier. And business strategy, people talk about like, oh, how creative is your business strategy? Business strategy is nothing more than this: taking unlimited possibilities, unlimited options and growth levers to grow your business, but with finite resources, and being able to prioritize which of these growth levers am I actually going to work on with my limited time and resources that I have. That is what business strategy is. And so it all comes back to planning, and it comes back to a CEO being able to map out, here are all my different growth levers. Here's a framework, and we could dive into that if you want. Here's a framework of how I'm going to score and prioritize all these different ideas. Because Steve, you and I go to a lot of conferences. Most people, when they go to conferences, they've got notebooks filled with like, I got to do this and this and this and this and this. And it's like, yes. And I used to be that guy, but then I realized like some of that stuff may never come to fruition, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you talked about instilling these things in our team. I think the one thing that I've learned having the experience working at Amazon was that they are, I think, a model example of how as they grew, they developed the 14, I think it's now 16 leadership principles that they made sure they ingrained in every single person throughout the organization, and said, these are the principles we operate in. And every meeting you have, if there's a conflict with these leadership principles, that meeting should come to a halt, and we should say that idea is flawed. Here's why. let's move on to something else. And it really has done a great job empowering people to do the right things because they've got this framework that they have to say, does it meet what we're going after or does it not? And I think that that's really key. Like, for example, at my organization, trust and integrity and honesty and these are really, really valuable and important to me. Like, every single person on the team, I need to trust intently. I need to make sure that they operate with integrity. We operate in what would be best for the client, not what would be best self-serving. And it's really important that you instill that throughout the organization. And how you do that is best led by example. So they can see, this is what you're preaching, this is what you're teaching, but this is what you're doing. And but having a framework as the business grows to make sure that that's always top of mind and so forth, I think is really able to help a business scale without losing what you stand for as a company. Because as your business grows, it's harder as a leader to maintain that. So I know that you have some different frameworks. Is there anything that you you'd recommend as far as how things have worked for you?
Yeah, well, I think that one of the first things here, Steve, is as it relates to your team, right? You talked about the values that you should have, and what are your core values? Those are important. But when we talk about prioritization and strategy, this all comes back to, like, can you as the business owner, can you go to any of your team members and ask them what their monthly goals are and what their quarterly goals are for their specific role, right?
Yeah.
And if they don't have an answer, they're like, oh, I'm not sure. I know what the business goal is. Like, we're going to get to 10 million in revenue. It's like, well, no, like, you yourself, like, what is the role you're playing to achieve that goal, right?
Yeah.
And what are the things you have to do this quarter? What are the things you're working on this month? And then that boils down to this week and then this day. And so the framework that we use is the 4-1-1 method, which is this, right? You have one quarterly goal, you have one monthly goal, okay? And then you've got 4 weeks in order to hit those goals, right? So how do you basically do that backwards planning and be able to say, like, all right, in my role as supply chain manager, one of my goals is to improve our inventory turnover ratio, right? So this month, right, my goal is, like, I'm collecting all of that data and I'm actually going to build a report that can be automated and it's going to send something out to our leadership team every single month, right? Or every single week to let us know where we stand with all of these products. Because maybe we need to kill some of these products because they're just sucking up all of our cash. And then they have their 4 weeks laid out of, like, here are the things I'm doing each week in order to achieve this one monthly goal. So that's what we do. So every Monday I have what I call the 4-1-1 meeting with each of my team members. And again, I have 5 people that report to me. I have a director of operations that has 5 people report to them. And then we've got leaders underneath them. We've got 30 people on our team, but, like, everybody has a 4-1-1 meeting. And their entire job is to say, here are the goals, here are the activities and the things that I need to do this week and in order to achieve this monthly goal. Because if people keep going in that direction, we're going to hit all the metrics that we want. But it all comes back to that quarterly planning. I think that the execution just fails when so often I hear people, it's like, well, I hired this supply chain manager, but they're just not doing very well. And I'm like, well, why? Like, what's going on? Like, what's the issue? They're like, well, I don't know. They're not they don't communicate very well. And I just don't feel like they're doing things fast enough. And I always ask them this question is like, well, how often do you meet with them? How often are you speaking with them and things like that? And they're like, oh, well, no, I mean, I hired them. And then, like, maybe it's like once a month, we'll actually jump on a call. But from there, it's just kind of like email exchanges. And I was like, that's your problem. That's your problem right there. Because if you just hire somebody and you just assume, oh, they're going to be super independent. They're autonomous. Now, for entrepreneurs, most of us are very independent, autonomous, self-starters, but you cannot project that on the rest of your team. Quite the opposite.
Yeah.
Instead, what you have to do is have to hold people accountable. You have to provide people that vision and help them continue to refine that vision every single week and align on those priorities. And then you have to have midweek touch bases where we have our L10 meeting following the EOS framework to bring in the leadership to be like, all right, how are we tracking? Are we hitting the KPIs? Are all of our team members hitting their KPIs? So really it comes down to like, have you put in place a CEO level scorecard that allows you to see, here are all the team members, here are the KPIs, and they're either green, yellow, or red. We're either moving in the right direction or we're not moving in the right direction. It's really theoretically speaking, it's as simple as that. The execution of it comes into like holding people accountable, and most people don't want to do that.
Yeah, it's really important as leaders that we understand our responsibility in the equation. One, everyone needs to feel important, and if you break it down into this is your in particular goals that lead to the bigger goals. Now they got a vision of how am I actually impacting the business? How am I making a difference? And that I think leads to a lot of satisfaction improvement because everyone wants to be a contributor. Everyone wants to be part of something bigger, but sometimes you need to kind of make that more clearly known. And having those touch bases, as you mentioned, allows you to mold and develop those people because left to their own accord, they may win or they may fail. But if you're guiding them and coaching them, just like having teenagers, you can't expect them to get through life without having some coaching moments to help them, through the journey. I've seen too often where managers or leaders put the wrong people in the wrong roles because those people weren't necessarily well suited. Like they thought, oh, well, they're really good at this, so they must also be good at that. Particularly leadership. Like they're a really good worker, they must be a good manager. You put them into a role that they're not accustomed to, they're not skilled at, or something, they may fail. And I like to look at when I hear complaints about someone is, well, what did they do before that? And how did they succeed in their last role and so forth? And oftentimes it's like, well, they did great up until this point, and then now, they're not cutting it. And they may have been put in a position that they're not really well suited for, meaning like, for example, this is an operations and analytics type person and you put them in a creative role or vice versa. Those are very different skills. Or maybe you put a good individual contributor in a management role, but you didn't really help them learn how to be a manager. And being a manager is much different. They could be the best contributor, but they may have the worst management skills. And you as a leader having those touch bases with them allow you to mold them, guide them, and instill your management and leadership style through them and help them along that journey so they're not hung to dry, figuring it out on their own and potentially leading to disgruntled employees working for them because they're a bad manager. So having a good pulse. And I think also, you mentioned that you have 5 direct reports you meet with. Having a reasonable number of direct reports that you can spend the time to do that type of interaction with is really important. If all of if 30 people reported to you, you would not be an effective leader in that organization. And there's a lot of Amazon businesses that are too flat and they don't have the right structure, like you mentioned.
Yeah, 100%. Steve, you want to hear my secret trick that I've learned as of the last year in order to know like what the right like job is for each of the team members and like understanding where their core strengths are, going back to like, would they make a good leader? Are they more analytical? Are they like a creative person? You want to hear the tool I've been using?
Yeah, love it.
So I had heard about this in a lot of conferences that I went to, like going back like 6-7 years ago. Okay. And it's culture index. And I remember hearing about it. And yeah, it's going to cost you like $15,000, $20,000 to get into this program, but it is hands down worth the investment. So that would be my recommendation to anybody that's beginning hiring. If you start with this and you begin implementing culture index, you will increase your hit rate on your team members that you hire on. You'll have an 80% hit rate. Like, they will stay, they will be good, they will be effective. And the magic has been just looking at those dots. Now, I've looked at, and again, you're like, oh, another personality test. It's like, no. Like, I have done the Colby Index, we've done the Myers-Briggs, we've done the DISC and all of that stuff. None of that stuff holds a candle to what we learned through the culture index. And we had a culture index coach who, like, we had everybody on the team take the assessment. And then the coach came to me and he was like, all right, let's go through all of these guys. He's like, I don't know who any of these people are, but I'm going to tell you how they naturally behave in the business. You tell me if I'm wrong. Every single one of those people that he talked about, he described exactly how they behave. And guess what? The problem team members that we were already like scratching our heads at and being like, oh, I don't know if this person's the right fit. Like, he pointed it out because he's like, they have these unique aspects of their personality that make them like, they like, for example, there's one that's like a debater role profile. And it's like, they just love to just shoot out ideas, but very low follow through. So they'll talk. And they might say all the right things, but when it comes to actually doing things, they can't do it. Like, they just fail at doing it, like low follow through. And they're not autonomous. So they have to be told what to do, but then they can't follow through with doing it. But they have lots of opinions about it, right? So it's like understanding these little nuances of your team members makes all the difference. And so what we've been able to do, like, honestly, since we've learned this, our entire organization has just like completely changed over for the better, because we are moving people into the right roles where people are absolutely crushing it in their roles. Whereas before, I was like, okay, they're doing all right. But I, like, to your point, I had people trying to be more extroverted than they are, and thinking creatively when they're more analytical and things like that. So anyways, that's my kind of like pitch to like get in there. Like, hiring and having the right people in the right seats is one of the most important things that you can do as a leader. And that is where Alex Hermosi, I follow his podcast a lot. He has a $250 million portfolio. He said the biggest thing that I learned, and I continue to learn this lesson over and over again, is it's all about the people. It's all about the people. And so it's all about who you bring into your organization, having the right butts in the right seats, and moving in the right direction. You got to be steering that bus headed in the right place.
Yeah. And on the flip side, it's the couple bad apples that poison the well. Like, if you have someone that's disgruntled, not a team player, not in it, for the company, but in it for their own selfish good, they will cause a lot of harm, because all the people that are really working hard and then they see this other person that's just skimming by, and management's allowing that to happen and such, it starts making everyone disgruntled. Or they're constantly in someone's ear with negativity, when we should be focused on positive, all working together, teamwork, things like that. So I've found that the faster you identify those individuals and move them out of the organization, the better off you will be, because if you allow it to persist too long, sometimes the damage is already done. You've got to identify that early on. It's pretty interesting to hear about the culture index. If you don't mind me asking, how does it work? You mentioned $15,000 to $20,000. Is that based on the size of your team and the coach that comes in and does an assessment, or is it just like a subscription that you have to be part of, and then it's a per person evaluation fee? How does that work?
Yeah, so it's just a one-time upfront cost, right? And then you're going to go into their training centers here in Dallas, and you're going to go there in person with a few of your team members, and you're going to learn, like, what do all of these different like profiles mean? And how do I apply this into my hiring decisions and management decisions on a regular basis, right? And so uh, every applicant, literally, like the test is like maybe will take somebody like 5 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes max. You're just picking words, and it's scary accurate. Like it describes me to a T. It describes my wife to a T. Like it's described every single one of our team members to a T. And you don't have to pay per applicant. Everybody, like once you're on, like with that upfront investment, like you've got it for life. But most importantly, you also have this coach that, like, when you're making a big hire, like when we hired our director of operations, I am so glad that we did culture index before that, because it came down to two candidates, and one had the exact culture index that, because you'll meet with the coach and be like, all right, what's the new role that you're looking to hire for? And he'll help map out and be like, this is probably the profile that you're looking for, right? And so the other one had it was a similar match, but not exact match to the profile we were looking for. And this director of operations has come in and just made a massive difference to our business. And then, like I said, for some of the other key roles that I've had, I've slotted people, now that I know who they are, slotted them into supply chain. And somebody is like a perfectionist, and they have gone in and they have perfected like our invoicing process and the way that we initiate POs and things like that, and like just made massive changes to our system. And they've got it on lock and key. Like they are a perfectionist personality. They're going to go hard and deep into one specific area and make sure that there's no mistakes, right? Those are key people to understand who they are. So anyways, that's it. Really, it was like a one-time class and learning. And then from there, I profile my family, my siblings, and anybody that they're considering hanging out with, friends that are dating other people. I'm like, oh, before you get married or you consider this, like, here's their profile. So it's pretty fun.
That's awesome. I know in the past at some conferences, you talked about how you use AI to sometimes hire. It's pretty interesting to, to realize that we have these new AI tools that can help filter down to the right candidates and so forth. Anything to share on how you use AI?
Yeah, the biggest way I'm utilizing AI to kind of like expedite the hiring process is kind of like twofold. Number one, whenever I need to create a role, this goes back to that planning and the KPIs that we talked about. You first have to create the role profile, meaning what are the big rocks, right? What are the 20% of activities that they need to be focused on, that they need to do first and foremost every single day? So map those out. And then what are your remaining 80% activities? What are just the sand that needs to be filled in the gaps for that role? And then what are the KPIs? What are 3 to 5 actionable, like tangible, measurable? These are not like subjective measurements. These are like black and white that will tell you whether that team member is winning or losing in their role. So I created a custom GPT that basically bakes in this process that used to take me like 10 to 20 hours to like pull different things and like think creatively of like, all right, what's this role going to look like? Chat GPT spits out like a whole bunch of KPIs for me to look at, a bunch of different tasks, things that they should be doing for that particular position. And then I'm able to take an hour, modify it, add in a few things that sparked my mind because of what I got from ChatGPT. So that has made a massive difference. So we're using that first and foremost. And then secondly, we have been using Workable AI Recruiter. So whenever we post a job, we'll post it on Workable. And then Workable has this feature that will allow you to like, it basically scans, scrapes, and I think it's either people that have ever applied through their Workable platform that they have records of, / there's some integration, somehow they're scraping LinkedIn data to basically, as soon as you post your job, it will say, hey, there's like 3,000 profiles that like match your job in whatever country you're trying to hire profiles for. You could, with one click of a button, send all 3,000 of those people like an email to be like, and these are passive candidates, right? You don't know whether they're looking for a job or not. But, and ideally they already have a job, but maybe they're not loving their job. Maybe you could win them over because you have a bigger vision or mission that you're going after. So we've been using that to just like try to reach out to people that are currently employed, trying to get them to come over. Because generally speaking, the best talent is already working somewhere else. It's pretty darn rare to pick up somebody that's in between jobs.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, most of the I mean, from my experience, most of the successful hires throughout the someone's career are generally targeted hires where you've identified someone that you know is a great fit for the role, but they're already employed, and you're able to lure them away. Or someone that says, "Hey, I know someone that's perfect for that job," or something, versus them being in the open market. So that's pretty cool. I know you guys have been on the forefront of social commerce, and particularly TikTok shops has worked really, really well for you. Can you share with the audience a little bit about how did you discover that, and what have you seen work most effectively for you?
Yeah. So on TikTok shop, I see that as the 10x growth lever for our business. And really it came at a point in time, our story, those that have seen me present this story, I initially, when TikTok shop first came out in 2023, there was an agency that was like, "Oh, we can get you on TikTok shop. This is going to be the next end all be all." And everybody's been talking about it. I was like, okay. So we went first with an agency, and guess what they told me? They'd spent 2 to 3 months, ate up a bunch of my money. And then they said, "I'm sorry, but there was nobody, not one person was interested in a sample from you unless you want to pay them up front to create videos. Like, sorry, we just didn't find anybody." And so I was like, all right, fine. I guess TikTok shop's not for us. But we then in 2024, we ran into an issue in our business where we were cash poor. Okay. We had some recent product launch fails. And like for the first time ever, I had to invest my own money into the business to pay payroll. And so at that time, like through a matter of prayer and, asking for divine intervention, like I feel like God enlightened my mind as I was driving to hockey one night. On the way there was a brand that was in the stationery niche that was doing well on TikTok shop. And then on the way home from hockey that same night, another stationery brand was crushing on TikTok shop. And I was like, all right, message received, because like I've never heard other stationery brands, right, on any of these other podcasts. And so literally like the next week I was like, all right, I got to figure this thing out myself. And TikTok shop, it's not hard. And long story short, I've gone to a lot of TikTok masterminds. In fact, I was just at one in LA yesterday. Anybody that's succeeding on TikTok shop right now, the business owner is the one doing it. It is extremely rare that this has been hired by somebody else because it's so new, right? But this is like the early days of Amazon. So those of you who have figured out Amazon, you can go figure out TikTok shop. It's not rocket science. But ultimately what I did, Steve, is I reached out to thousands of creators, sent out as many samples as I possibly could. And I made sure that these creators were like my target avatar, right? They are moms with children between the ages of 2 to 10, right? Like I reached out to them, gave them samples, and lo and behold, within our first month, somebody went viral. And then after that, more people said, "Oh, this person went viral. I want that product too." So it creates this perpetual snowball and flywheel. So I see TikTok shop, the brands that, and it's just not TikTok shop, but it's social commerce as a whole. The brands that are winning 5 years from now are going to be the brands that have figured out demand generation off of Amazon. I think Amazon only gets 10 times more difficult than it is today over the next 5 years.
Yeah. I think it's great. Maybe another time we'll have you on another podcast episode to dive into that deeper, because I think there's a lot to uncover with TikTok and social commerce. But why don't we let the audience know how they can reach out to you? I know there's a lot of different value that you can add, and if maybe you just share some of the ways people can reach out to connect.
Yeah, so I think the Probably the best one is follow the podcast. That's where I drop most of my wisdom there. So follow Ecomm Breakthrough. That's Ecomm with 2 M's. It's on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. And then if you do want to reach out to me individually, you can email me at josh@ecommbreakthrough.com.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much, Josh. Yeah, a lot of great nuggets here. So really appreciate it, and look forward to having you on again sometime.
Thanks again, Steve.
Thanks.